All right, now we're going to talk about the miracle in Kansas. And people are always talking about what's the matter with Kansas. Wrong. What's great with Kansas? The latest vote on abortion was shocking, surprising, and we have the answers for how it happened and what it might mean for the rest of the country. Joining us now is Brent Welder, great progressive, ran in Kansas' 3rd district as a Justice Democrat earlier, served with Bernie Sanders in the platform committee, did the best proposal of the platform committee's history, if you ask me. It's about money in politics. He's also a catastrophic injury and wrongful death attorney. He's won multi-million-dollar settlements. So a jack of all trades. So Brent, you're in Kansas and we had this vote. First, tell us about the vote. Set it up for us.
Well, I mean, it was shocking. First of all, the vote itself was rigged from the get-go because it was the language of the ballot measure, the timing of the ballot measure was all created by a supermajority of Republicans in the Kansas legislature. So not just any Republicans, Kansas Republicans, and a supermajority of them. They put the vote on the primary because they knew there was expected to be way more Republicans coming out in the primary because there was a lot of Republican primary contested races, and way more Republicans did come out. But despite every single thing they did, they couldn't stop the will of the people on an important progressive issue. And ultimately, the pro-choice side won the ballot measure by about a 60 to 40 margin. Just absolutely incredible.
So Brent, so first of all, that kind of shocked the whole country because all our lives we've been told by the media and everyone else that Kansas is really conservative. Kansas conservative, heartland, conservative, right wing, right? 60 to 40 pro-choice in Kansas. But wait, it gets crazier. So I'm just gonna read these numbers and then ask you about it. So in that election, Kansas had about 454,000 Republican voters and only 281,000 Democrats. 454 to 281 and about 184,000 independents. How the hell did we win 60 to 40 when the Republicans outnumbered the Democrats and the independents combined, if I've got my math right?
That's right. And not only that, I mean, for one, I think I was kind of doing the math on the back of the napkin there. I think even if you assume that every single Democrat voted pro-choice and every single independent, there was still even more votes than that for the pro-choice side of the amendment. So, that kind of gives you an idea. All 4 US congressional districts in Kansas went pro-choice. Even, the absolute most conservative one out in Western Kansas that has had just some of the most conservative members of Congress, representing them, went pro-choice. Another thing too that I think hasn't really been covered so much about this in the media and the mainstream kind of press that I've been seeing, and it's kind of hard to cover it unless you're really talking to people that were here on the ground, is that leading up to the vote, I was really afraid that the anti-choice side was going to win in a landslide. And not only because the question on the ballot itself was rigged, it was a ridiculously worded question, not only because of the timing and everything the Republican legislature did to kind of try to rig the vote, but because actually the anti-choice campaign from a tactical perspective was really well run. They had a really solid, consistent message. The themes that they used were actually literally, written onto the ballot itself because the Republican legislature wrote the ballot measure. And, on the other side, the pro-choice campaign, unfortunately, was, I thought, incredibly ineffectively run. There was still about the same amount of money spent on both sides, but there was no real consistent message. It didn't seem like they could really figure out exactly how they wanted to say it and what they wanted to say. The quality of the ads were very bad, but none of it mattered. It didn't matter when it was. It didn't matter how many, Republicans were coming out versus Democrats. It didn't matter how, poorly the pro-choice campaign was run and how effectively the anti-choice campaign was run. At the end of the day, the voters knew what they wanted. The voters knew it. And they voted that way, and nothing else mattered. And I think that could really have a big impact potentially on the elections this November. But I also think, there's a lot to discuss about what does that mean that voters consistently in ballot measures vote overwhelmingly progressive, but yet the representatives that get elected and that get put in front of the people by the leaders in Washington are not progressive and don't do anything progressive.
Yeah, every time I talk to you, I learn an amazing new fact about what happened in Kansas. So the Republicans crafted it. They put it on at the time that they wanted. They had way more voters than the Democrats, not even close. There was almost no contested Democratic primaries, no reason for Democrats to even show up. They spent the same amount of money at least, had a way better campaign, and they lost in every Kansas district. That's unbelievable. It'd be one thing if they lost in Kansas 3, but they lost in every Kansas district.
It's unbelievable.
And so that means that there's some chance that the Democrats are sitting on a tsunami, and generally speaking, as usual with Democrats, they don't know it. So before I get into even more numbers about Kansas, so then you had Pat Ryan happen, right? And so that's New York's 19th district, and the polling showed that he was down by 8, and then he won by 4, and he ran on abortion. So he was very purposeful about that. And Brent, I thought of you that night, just a couple of nights ago. And the reason and I think I even mentioned you on air about it, because the polling is of likely voters, but a lot of new voters are registering and none of them are in the likely voter bucket. So this might be a hidden wave that nobody sees coming.
Yeah, not just a lot of new voters. I actually looked into the numbers with the help of Harrison Triplett, who's an assistant of mine on various things, law and politics. And in Kansas, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, voter registration increased by 10 times, okay? Even in Missouri, which is a border state to us right here in the area, there was no abortion ballot measure even on the ballot in the primary. But after Roe v. Wade was overturned, their voter registration increased by sixfold. And in Kansas, the number of vote by mail participants doubled. The total turnout in this primary election compared to the last midterm election, which was the year that I ran in 2018, doubled. I mean, people are feeling this to their core. And one thing I've noticed, I think you know my wife, or know her a little bit or have met her. She's a great progressive activist here in Kansas as well, and pays a lot of attention to these kind of things. And I'll tell you, when I talk to her about this issue in particular, I can tell that she feels it just differently than any other issue. And obviously, there's a lot of men out there, myself included, who care very, very much about this issue. But when I talk to her and when I talk to other women, and even when I talk to women who haven't really been that involved in politics, they feel personally attacked and offended and victimized. Like they see right before themselves that their rights are being stripped right away from them, right in front of their face. And we had an amazing opportunity here in Kansas for them to go and directly voice their opposition to any kind of terrible law taking their rights away. And we saw exactly what happened.
Yeah, and so first of all, there's a couple of lessons that come out of that. But before I even get to that, so you ran in Kansas 3, and Sharice Davids wound up winning, and she's the current incumbent Democrat in that district. And people are really worried about her seat. That's one of the seats they're most worried about, right? But given what you're saying specifically about Kansas, it seems like that seat might be in much better shape than Democrats realize.
That's what I've been asked whether I think she's going to win in November. I think she is going to win. I really do. I would be now. I don't agree with a lot of the ways that she legislates. I don't agree with a lot of the ways even that she does her politics. Or kind of her methods. But I will say this: I think she has a very, very good chance of winning. I hope she will, voice important, stances on issues like this, and try to get out in front and that kind of thing. But I think at least in this particular district, and probably a lot of districts like it, that Democrats have a really good chance of winning. Now, with a huge caveat to say, that we've seen how many times over and over and over again throughout my entire life, when Democrats have an incredible opportunity like this, they screw it up. And how do they do it? Well, one thing they do is in primaries, they tell everyone that the progressive can't win in the general. Then in the general, they have candidates who don't believe it, who try to kind of run on progressive issues. And then when they trick the voters into voting for them, thinking they'll do progressive change, they get to Washington and do almost nothing to actually try to get it accomplished. So is she actually going to win, or is there a good chance the Democratic Party in general is going to screw this up? I think there's a really, really good chance of that as well.
Yeah, I got it at 50-50. So look, one of the issues with the Democratic Party is they say like, hey, you got to vote for corporate Democrats like Sharice Davids, right? Especially in places like Kansas because it's more conservative. But if it turns out Kansas isn't that conservative, and that it takes away their excuse to keep voting for economically right-wing positions that their donors want. And so it's maybe a mixed plus. Maybe that's why the Democrats aren't running as hard on abortion. Because if they do and they just landslide the Republicans in a year that the Democrats were supposed to lose, they might be out of excuses. So, but in terms of the two most important takeaways, run on abortion in this cycle, and do more ballot measures, because at least that way you can get straight to the polls. Does that make sense?
Abso-freaking-lutely. We need to do as many ballot measures around the country as we can possibly do. That's for sure. Unfortunately, in Kansas, only the Republicans can do a ballot measure because it has to go through the legislature. But there are a lot of states where the people can do it directly. So please, I hope people will do that in the states where it's allowed.
Yeah, and you say run unabashedly and aggressively on abortion in this cycle?
I think so. Yes, that and so many of progressive issues that are so important. I mean, student loan debt. All kinds of those kind of things. Why would the establishment Democrats run away from those kind of things? The people are really, really needing and desperate for that kind of change.
All right, Brent Welder giving us great news out of the middle of Kansas. So thank you, brother. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Cenk.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.